You may be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
There is an awkward moment in most every romantic relationship in which one of the people decides it's not working. Sometimes the other has already sensed that, and sometimes they're completely in the dark. It's not the blowout moment where we understand there was clear infidelity or some huge argument that left them broken, but there is sometimes just a subtle drifting apart. Then one, not wanting to hurt the feelings of the other, says, "It's not you, it's me." And you might remember this scene from Seinfeld in which George Costanza is about to break up with a girl, and the woman says to him just before he's about to say that line, "It's not you, it's me," she says, "George, it's not working, and it's not you, it's me." And George becomes enraged because he is convinced that he made up that line. And he is furious that she is now breaking up with him instead of him having the opportunity to break up with her. But he's seemingly more angry that she used his line on him. And the truth is, if we really believed those words, "It's not you, it's me," we would readily understand the implications of that self-demeaning and personal inability to connect, and that would be extraordinarily painful. We spend so much psychic energy putting ourselves down and blaming others for what we find lacking in ourselves. And because we feel a sense of lacking in ourselves, it's difficult to actually have faith in other people as well. And that's what makes relationships so difficult. Communication is hard because there's so much conversation already going on in our own heads. We find it difficult to connect with each other. And it's even more complicated in this world in which people come together from varied educational and racial and religious and national backgrounds, that it seems probably impossible to relate to one another. This week's Parashat says the same thing. As I mentioned in last week's commentary, Moses is a man without a national identity. The Hebrews think he's an Egyptian. The Egyptians think he's a Hebrew. The Midianites say he doesn't look like anything they've ever seen before, but he acts like a Hebrew. Truthfully, as I suggested last week, that Moses is, if not a biological orphan, he certainly is a cultural and national orphan. So it makes perfectly good sense when Moses comes to the Hebrew and says, "I'm going to free you from slavery." They can't understand what he's talking about. They are figuratively speaking a different language. Moses, at this point, is someone that doesn't even know the Hebrew's alphabet. And the blame game begins. The fruitless, worthless, counterproductive, dangerous game of who's at fault starts right in this week's Parsha. Vayidaber Moshe kein el bnei Yisrael v'lo shamu el Moshe. Moses came and spoke to the Jewish people, but they didn't hear him. Mikotze ruach u'me'avodah kasha, because their spirit was crushed and they were under the weight of cruel bondage, which unleashes, you should know, 75 comments on the phrase mikotze ruach, of a crushed spirit. And they all basically say the exact same thing that Ibn Ezra points out. V'lo atu ozen lidvarav ki ktsara rucham. They couldn't hear Moses because they were crushed. Their spirits were crushed, and no matter who came to them, no matter what words that person offered, no matter which language they were offered in, they couldn't be heard by the Jewish people, who were simply crushed under the weight of their oppression. And it makes sense. They were so beaten up. They were so beaten down. You can't possibly imagine a life that's different. No matter what people say, you're crushed by the feelings and nothing can get through. Tell a teenager who is struggling under the weight of school, under the weight of grades, under parent and teacher expectations, of collegiate admissions, that they don't need to worry, it's going to all work out. And you see the blank stare on their faces. I had so many of these conversations just this week as I met with the high school. So many of our students struggling right now because they're applying to colleges in this crazy time. Tell them not to worry. It all works out. And then you imagine to yourself what teenagers are really going through about the peer pressure and everything that they're supposed to wear and how they're supposed to wear their hair and what TV shows they're supposed to watch. And some of their friends are telling them they should try these different substances, whether they be drugs and alcohol. And you tell them, don't worry, it's all going to work out. And you can see they don't hear a single word. Now apply that to the Hebrews, who have been suffering for more than generations, but for hundreds of years, under the subjugation of intense cruelty and exploitation. There's no way they could possibly have heard what Moses was saying. When we are put down day after day, week after week, year after year, in the case of the Jewish people, century after century, you grow not to believe in anyone or anything that promises a future that's brighter. But guess what? Moses doesn't really believe it either. Moses returns to God dejected and says, it's not going to work. God responds, if the Jewish people won't listen to you, then go to Pharaoh. He'll listen to you. You can imagine the absurdity in Moses' head over what God has just instructed. If the Jewish people who had everything to gain couldn't hear the words of God, then why Pharaoh, who had everything to lose, would be able to hear God's voice through Moses? Moses appeals to God, and he says, Ani arel sfatayim, I have a speech impediment. You see, God, it's not you, it's me. It's not that they can't hear your message, they can't hear me as messenger. It's not that the Hebrews are at fault, it's just because I'm a poor communicator. And if you can't understand me, then why are they going to listen at all to the message that's so important? Moses makes a jump from they won't listen to they can't understand me. Instead of Moses recognizing the deep and unrelenting nature of the Hebrew plight and that it's insurmountable in just one leap, Moses blames himself. He falls back on the same old trope that we're used to listening to him recite. You may recall when Moses was at the burning bush, he says to God, I can't do it because I have a speech impediment. Moses hears from the very youngest age that there's something wrong with him. And it must be his fault. God appoints Aaron to be by his side as if to affirm that Moses, in fact, is missing something. We all revert back to these patterns and old excuses. The moment things don't go as we hope, we imagine, and we regress to when we were younger, less developed, less capable. We hear the naysayers chirping in our ears. Moses only hears what he remembers hearing when he was a kid. All of his friends making fun of him on the playground for speaking funny. And he decides that's his fatal flaw. And that he carries that into adulthood, imagining all the while there's something wrong with him. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can grow in self-confidence. We can change the way we see ourselves. It's what God asks of Moses and the Jewish people as God sets out on this process of building Moses and a nation. It's what God expects of Moses when God selects Moses to inspire the Jewish people to freedom. It's what God expects of the Jewish people with regards to what they believe about their own abilities. The journey of 40 years through the desert is about teaching the Jewish people that they are capable of becoming a nation, a powerful force for good in the world. The story we begin this week is about convincing deeply, internally, of our own capacity to overcome, to grow, to thrive. My Hasidic Rebbe, the Yismach Moshe, Reb Moshe Teitelbaum teaches us something remarkable. Yes, we're capable of it. And it has nothing to do with other people. We can see the patterns of dismissiveness. Yes, the Hebrews won't listen, says the Yismach Moshe. And yes, Pharaoh won't listen. And yes, you think you're the wrong guy for the job. But no, it's not that. Lashon ein dvarim muvanim kol kach. It's them. It's not you, says Rav Moshe Teitelbaum. He says it's not you, Moshe. It's the Jewish people's inability to hear. It's Pharaoh's desire not to hear. Yes, it makes perfect sense that Moses, you believe that you are saying it, and therefore no one will listen. The true spirit of leadership is not in bluster. It's not in saber rattling. Leadership is not about swagger or thunder or boasting. It's about believing in a future, and it's about believing in oneself to play a part, to play a role in bringing about that future. It's about believing in oneself as well. It's not about bragging to anyone who will listen. It's about finding a way to believe in oneself that's profound and sometimes immeasurable. And that's the journey on which Moses finds himself. In one of the most amazing moments that I speak of every year, God tries to convince Moses of his power. And he shows him a variety of tricks, and Moses does some of them, and others he chooses not to. But what I'm offering you this morning is something unique. We have long known the story of the Hebrew Exodus from Egypt, about getting Hebrews to believe in God, about getting Pharaoh and the Egyptian people to believe in the power of God. We know about the burning bush, and we know about the subsequent interactions between Moses and God in order to prove God's capacity to rule in the world. What I had this morning is something subtle and something a little different. It's also about proving to ourselves our ability. It's not just about laying it on God's shoulders to redeem the Jewish people. The Jewish people have to believe it themselves that they are capable and that they are deserving of being freed. It's about a nation of individuals who truly own their own talents. Look, there's a funny joke. I love this joke. There's a commanding officer at the Russian military academy. He was giving a lecture on potential world problems and military strategy. At the end of the lecture, he's asked if there were any questions, and one officer stood up and asked, will there be a third world war, and will Russia take part in it? The general answered both questions in the affirmative. Yes, there will be another world war, and yes, Russia will participate. Another officer asked, who will be the enemy? And the general replied, all indications point to China. Everyone in the audience was shocked. And the third officer remarked, "General, we're a nation of 150 million people. And that's compared to 1.5 billion Chinese. Can we win at all? Will we even survive?" The general answered, "Just think about this for a moment. In modern warfare, it's not about the quantity of soldiers that matters, but the quality of the army's capabilities. For example, in the Middle East, we have seen a few wars recently where 5 million Jews fought against 150 million Arabs. And Israel was always victorious. 5 million Jews versus 150 million Arabs. After a pause, another officer in the back of the auditorium yelled out, "Sir, do we have enough Jews?" Now, it's a good one. Look, maybe it's funny, maybe it's not. But the world looks to Israel as a nation that is by far the greatest overachiever of the modern era. But the truth is, we have been working on our ability and our understanding of that ability, refining those talents, growing them, building on them for more than 1,000 years. So just to sum up for a moment, if I've lost you already, some people can't hear us, and it may have nothing to do with us. The reasons the Hebrews couldn't hear Moses had nothing to do with Moses. Sometimes we see patterns emerge. And guess what? It may not actually be a pattern. The reason Pharaoh wouldn't hear Moses had nothing to do with Moses. Sometimes we apply outdated and false excuses both for our shortcomings and others. Both the Hebrews and Pharaoh were blinded by trying to hold on to a status quo, no matter how dangerous it was for both of them. Finally, blame is easy. Don't let it distract you from all you have left to accomplish. You are filled with extraordinary capacity and ability and talent. Moses didn't walk away. Don't you either. Shabbat Shalom. We continue.